All right, we got the white pieces. 15-minute game here. How should we start it off? All right, you know what? Let's start with e4. Wasn't sure what opening we were going to get. We got the Caro-Kann. I'm excited. New opening. I don't think we've faced the Caro-Kann too often. Against d5. c5 is all sorts of openings to play as white. Against c6, d4, knight f3, knight c3. These are the main moves to play. So I think after c6, I am going to go for very simple opening, which is just instead of d4 and d5, it's just knight f3, d5, and knight c3. So it's just the two knights version of the Caro-Kann. It's a really easy variation to play. I don't think it's a lot to remember. And also, most people, they're ready for you to play the main line, which is both your pawns going in the middle. This catches a lot of people off guard. So I've had a lot of success with it. Even if your opponent plays, like, one of the best lines, I think you're still very happy. So I definitely recommend it. E5, I mean, he's already asking me the tough questions. Why the heck can I not take that, Now, one thing that comes to mind is if I take it, and he takes on e4, and I take on e4, that he can play queen d4. And I'm actually losing a knight there, kind of remarkably. It's crazy. But I am losing a knight there. So takes on e5, pawn takes e4 is a little bit challenging. Am I afraid of d4? No. I won't go into detail about d4, but obviously it didn't happen. If it did, I would play knight e2. If I take and then d4 happens, it's important to remember there's no queen a5 check to win my knight because my pawn's there. But I will say after the move e5, what I think needs to happen is takes, and after pawn takes, then maybe capture on e5. That makes a little bit more sense. Rather than just taking immediately and allowing pawn takes there. Because those two knights stacked up in the middle of the board, that doesn't feel right. So I'm going to take on d5. Then I think I can go and grab this, this pawn here. Yeah, so yeah, knight takes e5 definitely looks like the move. If pawn goes to d4, again, I'm not feeling confident in that move. Move like queen e7 just feels very scary to me. But what I am going to do is take here and then look to play quick bishop check and then either get my king castled or play queen e2. So I am interested in knight takes e5 here. If queen e7, I can always break the pin. If you want to pin me with queen e7, I can do the same thing and unpin with queen e2. Okay, so my next couple moves I'm looking at, bishop there, queen there, castle. Queen e7, what did I say? So he wants to pin my knight, and I'm looking at a few things here. If I play d4, f4, his idea is f6. He wants to attack the knight now that it's been pinned. I get that. But takes f6, knight takes d5. It's possible that he gets into some trouble there. Right? That's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily make the most sense. However, I still feel like in that situation, it's unnecessary for me to have this knight hanging, and then he plays a move like queen d6, queen d8, my other knight's hanging. I mean, yes, there might be some stuff with queen h5, but that does look like a lot to calculate. It really does. So the moves that I'm looking at here are actually bishop b5 check first, like sort of interesting, and then castle. So the thing is, the queen is threatening to take the knight. But if my king was castled and the queen took the knight, I could just go rook e1. So if I give a check here and then I castle, this threat doesn't really exist. I have rook e1 incoming. I'm liking the look of that. I do think d4 with the idea to take here, or I do think queen e2. These are all good moves, but I don't think that anything really touches the speed that I'm developing with bishop b5 check. Nothing really compares to that. After knight there, we can just castle. If the queen takes our knight, rook e1 will pin the queen to the king. And this is like punishing someone that's not moving their pieces. What have I said about these players? They do not need to bring their queen out so early. And once again, it's happening. Queen e7. It's like, no, don't do that. Don't do it. If I take this, knight takes, and then maybe the knight takes my knight, I don't like that. So I'm definitely going to be castling. If bishop captures on b5, we'll just take back. Again, queen takes knight is not possible. So it's important not to take this bishop, though, because no need to bring his knight into the game and have it attack my knight for free like that. But yeah, queen takes knight, just that's the reason. You don't bring queen out that early, punishing my opponent for having the queen out too early and not castling. Two huge mistakes that people make when they're starting out in chess, and continue to make even up the rating ladder. But it's very prevalent here in this position, you can see. Queen takes c5, rook e1. Of course, bishop takes bishop, we'll recapture. And now I'm really threatening things like knight takes d5. I'm threatening things like rook e1 anyway, to bring the rook on the open e-file. I'm also intending to play simple moves like d4, bishop out, you know, just everything normal. But my next couple moves, they might be really devastating for black to handle. Not sure what he's going to do here. Knight c6, knight f6. These moves come to mind. Knight f6, you know, guards the pawn, develops a piece. That feels like a high quality move. But I'm very concerned after rook e1. I don't know what he's going to do about this. If he plays d4, what am I going to do? That's a fair question. My first instinct is like knight takes d7 because knight takes, and then rook e1 will just win the queen outright. So yeah, I think d4, knight d7 should win the game. Maybe there's like d4, knight d5, but to me, knight takes d7 is absolutely the simplest. Like basically, if it was my turn here, knight d7 and rook e1 would be the easiest way to win. So d4 does not really change that. He's spending his time here, but I'm happy to see that. I like to see people using their time. He knows it's a rough position. And although he has not even like moved a single piece to help him castle, and although he's moved his queen out early, you know, he did do this because he thought he might be winning the knight, pinning it to my king. Obviously, we had a really energetic reaction. From his perspective, right, he thought this was like, wait, I'm attacking the knight? The only thing you can do is defend it, and then I'm attacking it again? You can't move it, right? I think it's very fair from his perspective, even though he might know not to move the queen out early, he thought he had a winning idea. White's reply is just super energetic. It looks like we can't castle. We give a check, and then we castle. And suddenly he's on the back foot. And it just turned around like, you know, in a series of two moves there. Didn't look dangerous for black at all. It looked like white was on the back foot, but now we can see that black is actually struggling. If I was playing with the black pieces, how would I try to get out of this mess? Sadly, I might have to play a move like queen d6 to, you know, then at least after knight takes, I can put a piece on e7 to block a check, and it gets off the e file. And it's not pretty, but maybe I would do queen d6. So he decided to take the knight. I think you guys know what I'm gonna do. Rook to e1. Now I don't know. I see a lot of people in chat kind of like laughing here because he just spent a long time and this is the move he came up with. I wouldn't be so quick to laugh. My opponent gets a knight and a rook for a queen. And in my opinion, some of the ways that he could have played instead, like knight f6, I think are actually worse positions for black than taking a knight and rook for a queen. So I agree, it's definitely bad. But, you know, a knight and rook for a queen is not the end of the world. And I think his position was really, really bad anyway. So I'm not sure I had much of a better recommendation than this. I would maybe have tried queen d6 by him. Maybe that move was better than this, but other than that, I did not have a good recommendation. Bishop d6, like, you know, gotta give him some credit here. He's getting developed. He's gonna fall in to, unfortunately, another trap here. I call it a trap, tactic, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna take the queen. He's gonna take back, but then I'm gonna do the exact same thing again. I'm gonna pin him once more with queen e2. So it's like, great. You get the knight and you also get the rook now. But after I play queen e2, you're gonna lose the bishop. f6, well, knight c6 doesn't help at all because I can take it. But f6 runs into d4 and we capture that bishop next. Yeah, guarding the bishop, but now, just like when the queen was pinned, we're able to just pick up this bishop for nothing. What about f4? There's no way you could make a case that if you have two pawns to push, why would you not push the pawn that's in the center, that opens up your bishop, versus one near your king, which opens up a diagonal and doesn't help you develop your pieces at all. So it's kind of a no-brainer. If there's only two options, you would pick d4 10 times out of 10. Okay, so bishop takes. Now I could just play knight takes because I'm in no particular rush. Because this is pinned, but queen takes gives a check, then I can take back here, and then I can take on b7. So both moves are good here, but I am going to choose queen takes, I think. But I do want to point out that I think knight takes on b5 was a fine move as well. Maybe better, I'm not sure. Very, very close. Okay, knight c6. Yes, this bishop is hanging, but I think queen takes b7 needs to happen. Hits the rook, hits the knight, hits g7, where it's going to trap another rook, and the bishop's still hanging on e5. So I feel wildly attracted to this move. If I take the bishop, I think black will long castle. The king guards this pawn. I mean, obviously, he might just take it back and lose the game with queen b7, but we can't play chess like that. I think queen b7 is the best move. There's just a lot hanging here. He can't castle. The rooks are not connected. Knight e7 drops a lot of stuff. And this bishop is still hanging. Rook d8, the only safe... Well, I mean, you go rook b8 as well. But rook b8, rook d8, I take the knight with check, and then I take the bishop. And obviously, I've profited by playing queen takes b7. An intermediate move. And what's the material? It's queen for rook right now, right? Queen for rook, and he does have a knight as well, but trust me, at least a piece is falling here. So the end result, at best for him, will be queen for rook and maybe a bunch of pawns in my favor. Easily fixed, though. Really easily fixed. Don't bring the queen out so early. Get castled as soon as possible. Are you guys starting to see why we come up with, like... I'm not making that stuff up, right? When I do the habits series, there's a reason why you guys, if you follow the habits, are not going to be in positions like this. Because you're not going to be moving your queen early. You're going to be castling as soon as possible. You're not going to have your king in the middle of the board. There's a reason why the habits even exist. It's like, it's pretty much the opposite of whatever you're seeing in these games here. I like that he's thinking, though. I really like that. I don't think he's going to be able to save, you know, a piece here. He's going to lose at least a piece. But he's not just bulleting out the moves. He's definitely a good rapid player. Just in terms of the format. All right, now we do want to take this with a check. Queen takes here could be done, but if I'm winning one rook, I'd rather win two pieces. That's a check. Bishop is loose. King needs to move, and perhaps, you know, if the king moves there, I could even throw in another check by taking that pawn. As tempting as this is, I actually don't know if it is the best move. Still, I'm going to take it because it's with check, but there was definitely a real consideration for just pawn takes on e5 there. So yeah, let's just keep it simple. I mean, pawn off the board with check, why not? King needs to save itself here, and this should fall on the next turn. You know, if king f8 or king e8, the reason I'm happy to see that is because I know these rooks will not connect and the rooks won't get developed. More annoying is if somehow this knight gets developed, the rook gets out. So king f8, we're definitely happy to see. Let's keep it simple and take the bishop. Knight e7, I assume, will be played. We're threatening queen d6. Knight e7 is a good move, though. Very nice. So now our queen needs to move. Queen d6 doesn't really have the same impact because of king f7 in terms of winning the rook. But I like it because we have e6 check after that. So queen to me, queen d6 still holds a special place in my heart. Hitting the rook, and if rook b6, we have queen d8 winning the rook. And if king f7, we have e6, where the king stepping backwards would lose the rook and maybe get mated, and the king stepping forwards would lose the knight. Again, good move. Like, he might be looking at this and seeing that. Okay, this takes care of it. Queen d8 check. He must go forwards. And then queen takes rook. Why don't I blunder my queen to make it competitive? Honestly, it's a fair question. But first of all, if you'd like to see me blunder my queen and make it competitive, I have a speedrun series fully uploaded on our YouTube channel already. You can check it out. It's Aman's No Queen Speedrun, where I start with a low rating and I sacrifice my queen every single game for a pawn, and I go all the way up to 2100 ELO. So if you really want to see that, I've already done it for you. Also, the whole point of this is to be relatively educational. I'm definitely not looking to checkmate these guys with like bishops, knights, and like look for better. No, I'm not really looking to do that at all. I'm trying to show you guys that, look, if you guys were in this position with white, you wouldn't be guaranteed to win, right? You guys are the type of guys to go king f7, you take the rook as white, black plays rook e6, you take the pawn, and then you get checkmated. Like, straight up. So a lot of people think that this part of the game is just the fun part, whereas this part of the game is actually still maybe very, very instructive. Doesn't matter. Maybe you're having fun watching. That's fine. But I'm just saying, being up a ton of material, there's a reason why you guys don't just win those games. Because it's still a task. It's not like completely winning. It's not easy to do. So watching me and how I might win up a lot of material, I think is still relatively useful. And if you don't think it's useful, well, then enjoy it. Have fun watching me siphon every last pawn off the board. I'll take... He saved his pawn. I'll take that one. Of course, our bishop needs to develop and our rook needs to join, and that's pretty much the final touch. And there we go. Rook takes. Gonna keep it very, very simple here. Just develop the bishop. It's tempting to keep moving our queen because it's the strongest piece we have, but ultimately your queen is gonna become stronger when you bring other pieces into the attack. That's just how it works. Trying to think of like a, you know, like a combat analogy, but I feel like if, you know, you show up and you have a, you know, you have like a trebuchet and you're using it from a long way away to break down the castle walls. Well, if you don't have anyone else joining you in the attack and you only have a trebuchet, then people are just going to walk up to the trebuchet and just destroy it. But as soon as you add other elements like, oh, we got the foot soldiers over here, we got the archers over there, we got the cavalry over here, then nobody has time to go pay attention to the trebuchet because they have to deal with all the other threats in the position. So sure, this is like the trebuchet, but it's not very useful if it's just on its own. Very, very ineffective for the most part. All right, rook d1. We're looking to bring the rook in. Yeah, that's right. I knew I could get people on the Age of Empires analogies. Look at you. Now you all understand chess, don't you? Rook d7. Let's bring the rook in. Now, if the knight goes back, that's another story. We could use one of our minor pieces to attack it. The king goes forward, and I'm going to use the queen and rook to find a checkmate. I'm hunting the king right here. If the knight blocks, we can take it. The king only has one square, and it's f5. And then the queen can deliver a checkmate here. And, you know, from the queen being on h8, it only took a couple moves to activate our pieces. And then all of a sudden, look how strong the queen is. But the queen couldn't have done this checkmate on her own. It's a product of bringing more pieces into the attack. GG, that boy Gotti. Let's look at that game review. Exactly. Bring more people into the attack. Bring more boys to the party. So, 2 knights, Caro-Kann. If d4, then I would have been happy to play knight e2. Knight g3. Get my bishop out after. Ultimately, he played e5, which is definitely not a good move. Obviously, it's hanging a pawn. But I think taking it right away, although it's good, I don't think it's as good as taking on d5. So I was actually a little apprehensive playing knight takes e5. I decided to take here. Just to trade first, and now knight takes e5. And I know that bishop to b5 check, queen e2, and castle are coming up. But my opponent, he went for it with queen e7. And for example, bishop b5 check, bishop d7, castle, and it's really tough to play here. Really tough. Black's top moves, as you can see, are probably going to be moves that get the king out of the way. But this is what I was saying. During the game, it's like the opponent played queen takes e5, and we were like, oh, haha, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Now, you're probably all correct. He might have played this move and not even seen rook e1. But the point still stands. Queen takes e5 here. I mean, it's still a top move according to the engine. Easily a top move, because the position is so bad if you keep your queen that actually losing the queen for a knight and a rook might not be so bad. So it's like, at what point do you give credit to someone? If the 690 rated opponent doesn't play queen takes knight, and instead he plays like knight f6, right? The eval suddenly gets a lot worse. And all of a sudden, knight takes here, takes, maybe rook e1, and he's dead in the water. And it's like, oh man, you're losing your queen for maybe just a rook there. Or you're losing a full piece, and then you're going to lose your queen after. It's like, at what point do you give them some credit? Queen e5, it is one of the best moves. I don't know, I don't really think it's a blunder. I'm sure he didn't see all the variations that were happening there, but still, he played a top move. He definitely spent some time on his clock and recognized, okay, I'm pretty screwed here. Like, my king needs to be castled. Now, he missed the follow-up moves. Bishop d6 was definitely not the right move because of queen e2, but I feel like you can't have it both ways. It's like if he didn't lose his queen there, he would have actually been making a bigger blunder. Do we give him credit for that, even though it's a worse move? Or do we give him credit for the best move, even though it looks like a blunder? It's like, can't have it both ways. Yeah, we just started cleaning up the pieces here. And it's just about bringing other pieces into the attack, and then that will lead to mate. Good game. That was a nice game by my opponent as well, but again, I just thought it was really instructive. Not castling and bringing the queen out. God damn. If that ain't damning evidence. That's been the case in every single game that we've played so far. Every single game. People bring the queen out too early. People do not castle, and they're losing very, very quickly. Between hanging like full pieces, not castling and bringing the queen out, I've probably won every game mostly based on that.